All right, we are back for the final. Okay, sorry, my last video got interrupted. My dad did call me. I had to take the call. He loves to talk, and it's just like we have our daddy-daughter moment. But I wanted to resume the last video, right? Part 2 of the third part in the series. I was hoping I could just end that call after I finished talking to my dad and click resume, but Facebook had already ended the video. So here I am. We are back. So let's just go ahead and jump into it to wrap this video series up. So he was saying how, his father was a weak man, but he is not. Granted, his father died from alcoholism, and he kind of inherited and suffered the same conditions as his father related to chemical dependency, or I wouldn't take it to that step, right? But let's say chemical abuse, right? Chemical dependency is a whole nother level. So I can't speak affirmatively or confidently on saying that this particular person suffered from chemical dependency, but he kind of inherited those same characteristics, right? And I find it interesting how he says that his father was a weak man. But let's continue. So he says, now back to the conversation, as if that was a separate part. And I said in the previous video how it's interesting how he kind of compartmentalizes things too. It's like, okay, that's my dark past. Now let's go forward and get back to the conversation, when in fact it's kind of all interconnected, right? So he says, first of all, I'm totally fucked in the head when it comes to relationships. If a woman likes me too much, I lose interest. If a woman doesn't like me enough, I fall hopelessly in love. And I think that speaks to his attachment style, right? Because when it comes to attachments, and this is also related to psychodynamic theory, is that how we relate to people as adults in romantic relationships is a mere reflection of our own upbringing and the type of attachment we had to our caretakers, right? Now, granted, it's safe to say that his attachment was not normal, right? Not typical. Granted, he was abandoned by his mother at a young age. He lost his father at age 7. He was handed over to his grandmother at an early age. It's safe to say that his mom was not emotionally and physically present to be able to form a secure attachment. And that's necessary. It's the first 5 years are so integral to our development as human beings. So starting from the jump, this person, he missed out on a lot. It just wasn't there. So it makes sense why there's this tug of war, this push and pull when it comes to his relationships, with women. Right? It's this tug of war for woman. He says likes him too much, right? And I would even go to challenge that, right? To say, is it too much? Because I think for him, it makes him feel uncomfortable when a woman displays, could be a healthy interest. And I tapped into this in a previous video where he said that he was not able to meet the demands of this woman, a black woman that he had a lot of interest in. And he kind of romanticized this idea of an ideal relationship that could have worked out with this woman. But he says that she expected too much, or she demanded too much. of his attention. Now, we know too much is subjective, right? It's relative. So I question his assessment of what is too much, right? I question that. Like, was it really too much? Or was it just enough? And was it normal and typical as a normal expectation from a partner in a relationship? But it was just too much for him to give, right? It superseded what he was able to provide given his limitations, right? Related to his own emotional unavailability, right? Because he had a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure still does, and that's the reason why he deliberately chooses to be single. If a woman likes me too much, I lose interest. If a woman doesn't like me enough, I fall hopelessly in love, right? That right there says a lot. That brings us back to the mommy issues, right? I've had an impossible standard for love. I'm always seeking this unconditional love that, in my opinion, is actually unrealistic. Now, he calls it unconditional, but I'm wondering, right? Like, it's funny how he uses the word unconditional when really, I mean, romantic love, one would expect that is within the realm of normal for a person to display, unconditional love. Now, what are these conditions that you expect a woman to love you under? Is it to the extent where you become, you are emotionally detached, you're numb, you're not responsive, right? You're wrestling with your own dark past, right? That is still very much the present, that is resurfacing itself in the present because you are who you are, right? The same child that you were when you were 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, that had this unmet need, these traumas that you carried with you, this feelings of abandonment, rejection, right? You're still that same person, right? You haven't developed past that little boy that you were back then. And so then it shows up in adult relationships, right? Your romantic relationships with other people. And you're saying what a woman expects in the context of potentially a healthy relationship could be, right? Perceivably, a potentially healthy relationship, you're just not able to meet that. Give me a second, guys. So yeah, just makes me wonder a bit. I just took a few shots of mullein, which helps with my lungs. So I've said before how when there's a deficit, right, that comes in the form of an absentee mother or absentee father, the love that a child was supposed to get during that time period, they didn't get, and they will never get, right? But the fact that there is a void there is something that that person with increasing age craves, a desire. And that craving, that desire just doesn't go away. It's like always is yearning for what you did not have. And it's evident here, right? In this particular story here that we're unraveling. He has a yearning for a maternal figure, clearly, which he's recognized. And also he has a yearning for a dominant, masculine, paternal figure That's the reason why he says that he aspires, he fantasizes. Like it would make his world if he was able to find this ideal of a partner man, masculine, dominant man, where he could be subservient, right? 100% submissive. Now, I wonder if he has developed enough insight to be able to tap into what would that submission look like? What developmental stage would you as a submissive manifest yourself? What are you needing from this dominant man? And how will he be able to nurture those needs that you have, right? How will you show up? Because if you're 100% submissive, right, that puts a huge burden on this person, right? Yes, you are submitting, right? But what is it that you inherently need? How do you want to be taken care of as this fully submissive partner to a man? And I understand why you always take it back to it being unrealistic, because you're 42 years old at this point and you haven't attained it. It's only an idea in your mind's eye. It's not something that you fully have wrapped your hands, your fingers around. And like you say, you've been on the grinder site, you've been on dating sites, right? And had hookups. And while, yes, it could have been exciting, could have been fun, potentially in the moment, but it really did not fulfill this unmet need that you have. And it's never going to be met. That's the thing. It's almost like there was a point in our growth as mature adult people that we come to realize, like, we have to just let go of what could have been, what should have been, but wasn't. That's how we heal. That's how we grow. It was like, yes, I yearn for this. I desire this, but I won't get it. And I think the funny thing about life, though, because it's not that nothing is possible. In fact, anything is possible. And what you deem to be unrealistic, right, is not that it's necessarily impossible to have. But I think it's like the more we yearn for it, the more we crave it, right, the more we seek it, it's the irony to life. It's just like the further away we get from it. Some would argue that, okay, depending on what it is that you're yearning for, that you are aspiring to have, you could actually manifest it, right? The more you set your mind and intentions on a thing, that's how manifestation works. Some would argue that. I've manifested a lot of things that way. I mean, when you look at what I have here, right, even though, yes, it's not everything, but it's more than what a lot of people have. I make well over 6 figures. I live in New York City, the most expensive city in the country. I live in a very posh neighborhood in Upper East Side of Manhattan, right? Like, I have a lot. And these things that I have were once dreams, right? I am a clinical psychologist. It's something that in my mind's eye, I saw myself attaining, acquiring, and having this this belief system, right? And believing that this is something that I want and setting my mind on it. So much, I was so driven and focused to the point where I aligned things so that it manifested. Of course, I had to put in the work, but through having to put in the work, nothing could get in my way. Nothing. And granted, there are many obstacles along this course for me to get to where I am, but nothing could get in my way. And here I am, right? But I think when it comes to relationships, it's a little bit different, right? Because it's like having to manifest a whole nother being. It's one thing to manifest a job. It's one thing to manifest a career or to manifest a certain income, right? To manifest a house, right? But it's a whole nother thing to manifest a whole being that matches meets your expectations, right? Of what you see that you need for this person to be for you. To build a whole nother person outside of you. To imagine this person is like, okay, to believe that this person has to exist. There has to be a person that exists, a man like for yourself, who's dominant, who's alpha, who's black, who is attracted to submissive white men. Not only that, who can meet my needs and who's looking for something serious, who's willing to take care of me, who's willing to take me in under his wing. Now, I do believe such a man exists, right? But it's just a matter like, where do you find him, right? Where is this man? Right? I'm always seeking this unconditional love that, in my opinion, is actually unrealistic. This need for this intense love might be a syndrome caused by the lack of attention from my mother during my development. Not only your mother, but I always say combine your mother and your father. And granted, you still aspire to live up to this whole traditional sense of a family, right? Including a mother, father, right? Man, woman. You still aspire to that. You're still trying to kind of fit into this, typical narrative of the American dream. But then it's like you got something else in your back pocket just in case that don't work out. Right? It's like you have all these drives, these things that are driving you, pushing you, motivating you, that come from deficits in your childhood. And you're trying to seek this fulfillment in an adult woman, right? In an adult man outside of you. This makes me think about my recent ex, the one I told you about. I think about her a lot. She might not have been perfect, but I think she could have been perfect for me. She was very attractive. The sex was outstanding. Organs communicating were the words you use. And I had to think, I'm like, wait, did I say that? I don't believe I said that. And if you are certain that I did say that, go find the time step in the video that I said that. I don't believe I said organs communicating those exact words. Maybe I said sexual energy exchange, but I don't recall saying organs communicating. But anyway, I get what you're saying. She showed interest in my children and in my business. So she was genuinely interested in you. I mean, for a person to be interested not just in you, but the children, which essentially is baggage for a lot of people, she was interested also in your children and in your business. She tried to learn how to budget and she wanted to have more children. I honestly wonder if I could ever do better than her. And I didn't treat her well. Now, in these emails, right, it's, I would say it's a good little essay. Probably 1,000 words or more, has to be. He said a lot, and he touched the surface, right? But to go into detail, like I was saying, quoting Sigmund Freud, what is said is less important than what cannot be said, right? Maybe it can be said, but you just didn't say it. When you say you didn't treat her well, this just makes me wonder. Of course, I have questions, and I'm pretty sure those watching this video may have questions. What did that look like, right? You didn't treat her well. And I spoke to this earlier in a previous video. Sorry, I got this shit smoked out, y'all. I love incense. Sorry, this is just my thing. I love incense. To me, it's a form of grounding. I like aromatherapy. But I just spoke to this before to say how our early childhood experiences, how that becomes the template and the framework for how we relate to other people in our adult relationships. And so, given you grew up in an environment, a home that had domestic violence, that was the norm, I would not be surprised if you yourself have become violent, whether verbally, right, physically, either way, right? And I know it's difficult for people to say that, to admit that. It requires a degree of trust. It requires a degree of just being comfortable in who you are, right? For me, I'm a relatively transparent person, and I've made a lot of videos, right? I know some of y'all are just like coming across my channel. You're just now discovering me, but I've made a hell of a lot of videos just talking about life, relationships, my experience in dating, even while I've been in relationships, even while being in an abusive relationship, right? Making videos like while I'm like in the trenches, you know. So I've spoken from personal experience. That's another reason why I'm not dating. I'm ashamed. You're ashamed of what? Ashamed of yourself and your current inability to treat women well, to treat people well. You're ashamed of how you show up in relationships and your degree of insecurity. Speaking of which, like I went to Dallas BBQ tonight, right before I did this video. And there was a couple sitting next to me, which I kind of spoke to in the previous part to this one here. A man and a woman, right? And the man, he got up and left. I didn't even notice he got up and left. I was just like sparking conversation with the woman sitting next to me, right? And we were, talking, and I let her know I wanted to go see The Color Purple. How was it? And, who's vibing? He comes back, and I notice immediately a shift in her energy. And she just shut down. Like, she was open, expressing herself, right? Happy. She asked me, did I go by myself to the movie? I was like, yeah. And her reaction, I noticed, it came from a place of, I want to say jealousy. I don't know if jealousy is the word, but it came from a place of comparison. And I sometimes get that a lot from women because I'm my own person and I love the space I'm in. Listen, I've been there in that space, and I really picked up on the vibe that she was in an abusive relationship without her even telling me that she's in abusive. I can tell, aside from me studying human behavior, I lived it. I'm a whole human being myself, and I've lived that experience. Being in an abusive relationship, I've been there, and I know the signs, I know the symptoms, I know the vibe, I know the spirit, I know the energy so well of what it's like being a recipient of abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. Like, I know it all too well. And so when he came back to the table, it's like, yo, her energy, it was like night and day. She shut down. Literally, like, the conversation just like abruptly ended between me and her, and like her whole energy shifted. And I appeared, I'm still eating my food, enjoying the vibe, eating my food, right? And I peered up and I looked at her, and I'm looking at him and like the guy, yo. Like, you scared of this motherfucker? And so he's like, oh, I see you a new friend. And she's like, all quiet, soft-spoken. Now, she wasn't soft-spoken and communicating with me. She was just herself, expressing herself, right? Confident. But then he comes, like, how do you shrink? She shrunk down to like this woman of inadequacy and insecurity. And he's like looking at her. He ain't look at me because I'm like, bitch, you don't want none of this. You don't want none of this motherfucking energy. Because I wasn't go there, but he's looking at her the whole time. He's like, oh, I see you met your friend. And she's like, yeah, she's soft. And then somebody else walked past that she recognized and she spoke and she was like, hey, and I think this is a person that she worked with. And she's like, talking to the person they walked by. And he's like, oh, who's that? The signs, y'all. I know the signs all too well because I live this shit. Control. He's like, oh, who is that? And then she's telling him, I was like, oh, somebody I work with, well, whatever. He was like, oh, I don't know them. Like, I never heard you talk about that person before. Like, do you have to know every single person that she interacts with? Right? But, people, men, it can be women too, right? But in this case, it was a man who are insecure and who are abusive. That, they insecure in themselves. I can see the insecurity in his ass, yo. It's like you have to control every little aspect of your partner. And I'm looking at her face and her energy, and she just looks so sad. Like, how do you go from this vibrant woman that she was just talking to me when he went to the restroom? She's vibrant. She even cracked a smile to this woman, like appearing to have low self-esteem. And she's just sad. She wasn't even eating her food. She just stopped eating. Appetite gone. You see the impact of abuse, of psychological abuse? And this is in public. Imagine what happens behind closed doors, to the point where she don't even want to eat. She lost her appetite. She's depressed. She's sad. It was just all emanating. The whole aura just communicated. Like, I wish I could just take a picture. But I remember it very vividly in my mind to see like how she looked. And just to see how her whole countenance changed in a split second when he showed up. That let me know right there that it was he's psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive, and could be physically abusive towards her. I can tell, she has been traumatized. It's sad, and it rubbed me a certain kind of way. It did something to me in that moment when I saw this shift happen in her with him showing up. I'm just like, oh no, this ain't it, buddy. This ain't it. So let's continue. Says he's ashamed. I know that I have an unreasonable sex demand. My ex did try to provide. I used sex like an addiction. But with her, it was truly intoxicating, I'm sure. And I've said this before. You talk about being clean from substances, and you use your choice of drugs were, I'm about to say heroin, because a lot of the patients I work with, their drug of choice was heroin. But for you, cocaine and alcohol, and how you're clean from those two substances now, right? And so, yes, I talk about sex being a drug because essentially it activates the same pathway in our brain. The same dopaminergic pathway that gets excited, that gets activated when a person is craving, seeking drugs, and using drugs. It's the same neural pathway that's activated, right? That dopaminergic release when you have sex. And I can tell You know, even just the way, I don't know, you haven't seen your face, right? But just with, even without that, just from the conversation and just your kind of fixation, and it's beyond enthusiasm, right? And granted, you say you're doing a good job at controlling these urges that you have, because you can be out here running a fucking amok, right? But you're not sexually. But I still get that sense, like, yeah, this is a problem for you, so you made a conscious decision to be in control of that, right? Almost like a reformed addict, you know, a drug addict, right? And they can count the number of months and years they've been clean from using substances. I'm sure you probably, such as myself too, listen, I'm not the one to point fingers, right? It's like preaching to the choir. I can't count down to the exact date, but I can tell you this coming January 2024 will make 3 years since I have not had sex, intercourse. Not that I was an addict, but yes, I do enjoy sex. I do. But I'm very mindful, right, of that, and knowing that I need to contain that sexual energy, because there's consequences to everything. So let's continue. I used sex like an addiction, but with her it was truly intoxicating, and it did not seem like my penis size even mattered to her. One time we were in Walmart and she picked up an eggplant, looked at me and smiled. I said, "That's not me." And she literally said, "I'm starting to think smaller might be better." I think this was because she really liked me. Of course, she's just stroking your damn ego. And of course she could have did better. And you say you thought perhaps you could have did better too. I think sometimes like we think that. It's like always in the back of our mind, like, oh, I can do better. What else is out there? Right? And you're constantly chasing after an aspiration of something that could meet some unmet need. That will never be met. I've already established that. I can say it over and over again. The love that you were supposed to get in childhood from your biological mother, from your biological father, you are not going to get. You will never get. You may receive a semblance of that, right? And people, but it's just not going to measure up. So oftentimes people who, for this is true, find themselves going from one relationship to another, just chasing after something that will never be attained. It's an unmet need. It's a everlasting void, right? Thinking, oh, I wonder what else is out there. Maybe I can find better. When she was it, but this is the frame of mind that you were in, not seeing her for who she is and what she's worth, but you're kind of seeing her for what she can do for you. And granted, she obviously, no one will be able to fulfill that void that you have that is forever there, and it will continue to grow and be a deeper void, considering you continue to go down that path, right, of utilizing sex as a tool to fill that void, which you stop yourself. Like you say, you are currently abstinent and you're working on building your financial resources. But that's what happens. And people, they listen, you have to know, you know. But if you're doing this, you learn from experience, like that void is just still going to be there. Yeah, it feels good in the moment, but after, people wonder about, like, well, why is it after I watch porn or after I have sex, like, I feel disgusted, I feel still empty, right? Because it's not doing it for you. It's not it. I'm starting to think smaller might be better, she said. I think this was because she really liked me, right? Trying to stroke your ego. I noticed that after we broke up, our sex was not the same. I could see that she was not orgasming. orgasming. Well, the connection is lost. Why would she orgasm? She probably wasn't even orgasming when y'all were together. A lot of women fake orgasms. That, I can tell you, is a fact. You know, women that you're engaged with not going to tell you this, but women in surveys have admitted that, nah, they're not having an orgasm. They faking it to make the man feel better. And I've said this in another video that I made, that, and even post I made on Facebook, like, women got to stop faking that shit, right? Or the fake moaning, just the faking like you're having a fulfilled experience sexually with your partner when that's not even the case. It's not satisfying. But women, we're just so socially conditioned to try to please a man and make a man happy at our own expense. And it's not hitting for that. Next, I want you to know that you changed the way I was thinking about the guy in prison. So in an earlier email, he did mention that he volunteers at a prison. And he has his eyes on this black man that is, you know, physically what he looks for in a man. And then I pointed out to say, like, listen, that first of all clearly is inappropriate, right? Like, you work there, he is an inmate there, right? So there obviously is a power dynamic, right? It's a unequal power dynamic, and it's unfair for you to take advantage of that as a hired volunteer that works there. This fraternization, you know, it is an unequal balance of power, and you are abusing that power and that privilege that you have, not only as a volunteer or / employee that works there, but also as a white man, right? And him being in a disempowered position as an inmate there. Even if he may be showing you attention, you know, it's still unfair, right? And it can come back to bite you in the end if it hasn't already, you know? So here he's saying that, you know, my commentary on that changed his thinking about, you know, the guy in prison that he is attracted to. He says, I hope that I would never have crossed that line anyways, yet I wasn't thinking about his vulnerability being an incarcerated black man. While I'm a free white man, it would be extremely predatory, exactly, and reminiscent of the darkest part of our history. It's disturbing that I didn't realize that by myself. I mean, you're in your own emotions, right? Kind of selfish emotions. You're driven by your own motivations, selfish motivations, right? Not thinking of other people outside of yourself and how your behavior impacts and affects someone else where they stand. You just all here, right? Kind of self-centered, like you mentioned, narcissistic and egotistical. And people that are like that, it's just, listen, they fuck everybody else, right? And it's very easy for people like that to get in that mold. It comes very natural, right? It's just like they're on autopilot. It's not like a mold they have to get into. This is just kind of who they are, how they have been shaped by their own experiences in life. They were forced to focus on self, right? And self only. Me. What about me? When the world was happening around them. So yes, it makes sense that you default to that as an adult. But is it healthy? Is it adaptive? Right? Is it productive? No. May have been in a certain period of your life, right? At certain times, but nah. One last thing. When I was at University of Miami, I had a psychologist. After many sessions poring over my entire life, he stated that he wouldn't want to live if he had to go through the things that I have gone through. Now, all it took it for me to read that first line of this paragraph, right? And we're getting ready to wrap things up. But just by me reading that and him kind of tying our conversation, because it's funny how he proceeds this paragraph by saying, okay, by the way, I appreciate you for enlightening me, but meanwhile, boom, I had this psychologist who was terrible, essentially. That's what he's about to say. I'm going to read you guys what he says specifically, but I find it to be interesting, though. And I saw, like, the way I interpret it as a split. Right? He's like, okay, that psychologist was bad. You're good. You're a good psychologist. But that psychologist was bad, which therefore makes me question your efficacy, right? Not necessarily my efficacy, but the efficacy of psychologists or whatever, right? It's like, I get it. And even, like I said, with me reading that first line, I automatically knew he's going into defense mode. He's in defense mode. So let's continue. Let's see what he says about his psychologist at Miami, University of Miami. He says that after many sessions poring over my entire life, he stated that he wouldn't want to live if he had to go through the things that I have gone through. He quickly realized what he said and apologized. Now, he knew my brother's history. Remind you, his brother died from suicide. But I never said anything like that about myself, right? He said that he never admitted to wanting to end his life or having thoughts of suicide. I am not like that at all. That is simply an impossibility for someone like me. There goes your narcissism. It's funny though how you talk about your dad, right? Your dad, his life got cut short from alcoholism, right? And you refer to him as a weak man, right? And even, as you said that, you said, how did you say it? Not me, right? But I am not. My father was a weak man, but not me. Are you kidding me? Not I. Then here you go again, right? Another parallel saying that, your brother ended his life, right, by suicide. But I never said anything like that about myself. I am not like that at all. That is simply an impossibility for someone like me. Just want to emphasize that so that you're aware, right, of your pompous attitude. However, at that moment, I learned something valuable about many people. When they listen to your issues, when they diagnose and give their opinions of who and why you are, they tend to see only through the lens of their own experiences. Only? So this is where I realized, okay, yeah, he felt a kind of way. But why, though? And it just makes me like, what made... I know you're going to watch this, right? What made you go back down memory lane way back when you were in college at University of Miami, and I don't know if you were referred, voluntarily, involuntarily to participate in psychotherapy, right? But I'm curious, like, what made you at this point in the discussion bring up that? Like, how is that relevant? And I can't help but look at the process, right, of your train of thought, right, your thought process and how we get to this point just in this singular email here, right, where you're starting out talking about your dark history and then progressing into talking about a failed relationship that you reminisce on, right? And then you admitting that sex is like an addiction, right? And just not living up to someone's expectations. And then you giving me props, right? Stroking, I guess, in a sense, my ego. Thank you, right? But then you have to end by stroking your own ego. Do you notice that? Did you notice that? Did you notice that that last paragraph there is you stroking your own ego? Comparing your brother's end of life by suicide against your own. Oh, I would never do that. Not I. Kidding me? Right? Comparing myself, right, who you are in this conversation with, me being a psychologist, and then your former psychologist. I'm not your psychologist, by the way. I have to keep reiterating that because sometimes people can get confused because I do these analyses right here for you guys publicly. And I know it can feel like an intimate relationship because I reflect back to you who you are. But we're not in any kind of formal relationship for that matter, right? A professional relationship. I have to clarify that. But it's just like, I get it though, right? And it's just like, good brother, right? Yourself. Oh, bad brother, my brother, bad brother, right? Good psychologist. You see that? Oh, bad psychologist, right? Stroking, all of this. What does it serve to do? It serves to make you feel good, right? What a nice way to end this conversation in a bow, making yourself feel good. And you've perfected this. I'm pretty sure you're good at it. You kind of do it so seamlessly. And I said before in my initial response to your first email that, you're a really great writer and well articulate. You put your words together very nicely. You're an effective communicator, right? You know how to get your point across very succinctly. But did you notice that, though? I just want to ask, did you notice that? Thank you, Kenyatta. He said, keep up the excellent work. Thank you. Did you notice that, though? So let's dive deeper into this paragraph here that you leave us with. I think I agree partially with what you said about how helping professionals, particularly psychologists, look at people's issues through a lens, right? Usually it's multiple lenses. I want to say one lens, but when I say multiple, to your point, yes, through their own lens from their personal experiences, right? That's who we are. That's not going to leave. And through our training, they emphasize the importance of, yes, we can retain our own personal identities, right? So for me, I'm a Black woman, right? Those are two identities, being a Black woman. Not only that, African, right? A descendant of enslaved Africans, that is. I'm an American, like hyphenated identity, right? As a woman, right? So I come with my own ethnic and cultural identities. That's not going to leave, right? But through my training, and this is across the board for psychologists, is that they train us to be mindful of who we are, our identities, what has helped to shape who we are, right, through our own experiences, to be mindful of that, not to put it aside and throw it away, not that we have to just negate that altogether or it doesn't exist. No, it's there, right? But just to be mindful of that. But I disagree with you, though, when you say that's the only lens in which psychologists look through. No, I mean, clearly that would throw out our whole entire training, right? So psychologists are trained to look at issues through different theoretical lenses, right? So for me, I subscribe to the school of psychoanalytic thought, right? That's where the likes of Freud come in, right? And being able to look at human behavior through this lens in terms of looking at a person's childhood experiences, right? In the first 5 years of development. Looking at defense mechanisms, looking at the subconscious, the things that the part of our psyche that is there, right? And we're not quite fully aware of, right? To make the unconscious conscious. Those are just a few aspects of psychoanalytic theory, right? So that's one lens. And another lens could be CBT, the School of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, right? That's one. There's different lenses, right? Another lens could be family systems theory, looking at the intergenerational transmission of trauma and certain aspects of relationship dynamics, right, that are passed down through the generations, looking at patterns of ways people relate and interact with each other as it's reflected within family dynamics across the generations, right? That's where a genogram would come in to play. There's attachment theory. So it's different lenses in which we look at behavior through, right? To conceptualize, to understand the behavior, to diagnose. For me, I'm not really big on diagnoses, though it is a part of our work that we do, especially if you're working with insurance companies, right? Private practice, there's no need necessarily for a diagnosis. If you are taking private pay, right? Not going through insurance companies. The whole point of, a big point, I say the whole point, but a big reason for the need for diagnoses or diagnostic labels is so that providers could enter a code for reimbursement purposes so that insurance companies know, what are you treating, right? Why are you asking for reimbursement? The other obvious reason is for communication purposes, so that people within the field, within the profession, can be able to have a common language by which we understand a person's behavior and to be able to cluster certain symptoms to make a formal diagnosis, right? I'm sure you know this. You say you went to school. I wouldn't be surprised if you took a psychology course. A lot of people somehow come across psychology, classes, right, through their education in undergraduate school. But I took that more so like you saying, right, and it's you kind of defending yourself, right? I took that not so much, that this psychologist of yours is projecting, right? And there's so much to assess about this man, right, who you were seeing at the University of Miami. I mean, what is there to see? For him to say, oh, well, if I were you, I wouldn't be able to live through that, right? What is that? It really says nothing about him. If anything, what I took from it, what it says is that he is paying homage to you in your degree of perseverance. And for him just to put himself, right, to insert himself in that experience, right, and you overcoming the obstacles that you've been through, kind of him putting yourself in your shoes. The whole purpose is to kind of normalize the situation. That's how I took it, right? And there are therapists who may use that intervention or technique, right, to normalize the situation, to say, okay, well, first of all, life happens to many people, right? But he accentuated your experience and your triumph over what you've been through to say, you know what? Yes, you went through this. And had I gone through it, and he used himself because, I mean, obviously it's a form of immediacy, right? Which is a technique, right? Where the therapist inserts himself in the dynamic, right? And uses I statements. But he could have put anybody else in that. It doesn't have to be him, right? He could have said, well, whoever, right? It was in that situation that you went through, they would not have survived. I think, though, I mean, clearly, currently now, you reflecting on that, and even back then, you were not in a position to receive that. And I think when he said it from a good place. He said it from a space that he probably assumed y'all had developed enough rapport and understanding with each other. Right? For him to insert himself, right? It's not usual. It's not likely that, psychologists, especially at that level, speak about themselves, especially like frequently anyway, right? But I think for him to kind of insert himself, right? You put himself in your shoes. It came with the premise, the understanding that y'all had developed a degree of rapport. You can reflect back on how many sessions did y'all do when that came out of his mouth, right? Where were y'all at in treatment when he said that? But regardless, right? I think it says a lot about you. You says that it's like you're trying to turn, right? And notice I'm paying attention. The thing about me, and I think other well-versed, well-experienced clinicians, is that we're always on your heels. We're always there, right? And for me, being just like I'm a lifetime analyst, like it's funny because like I can be at a bar, I can be anywhere, and in my interactions, my mind is always analyzing situations. And I had this encounter with this person at a restaurant recently, which I talked about in one of my recent videos, and he's like, oh, even at a bar, you're always analyzing. Yes, it doesn't shut off, right? This is just who I am, right? And I just so happen to choose a profession that aligns with who I am. But it's like always very attuned, right? They call it attunement. Always kind of like on your heels. And I see it's like you wanted to turn the tables. You wanted to maybe, like I get it, maybe the mirror is just too clear. It's reflecting back too much and it's too heavy. Sometimes it's hard for us to really see ourselves, right? I'm not just talking about like literally you holding a mirror up, physical mirror, looking at yourself. That too could be difficult for some people. But I'm saying, metaphorically speaking, when that mirror is held up and I've, clearly reflected back a lot of your life and yourself to yourself, that can be painful. And so I see here what you did is like you trying to turn it, right? And that's fine. Because like I said, I'm not your therapist, I'm not your psychologist, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, even if I was, right? Which that wouldn't necessarily be a possibility because you don't live in New York, right? You have to live in New York for me to be your psychologist. But let's just imagine. For me, I am the kind of psychologist, I'm the kind of therapist, like, I'm in there with you. And I my patients do that sometimes. Like, I see when they're like trying to flip it. And it happens when, times when they feel uncomfortable. It's a defense mechanism, right? Deflection. And they try to turn it and put it on me. And I ride with it. Because the thing, and it should be clear for like people in this field, this profession. Our training, right, consists of many hours. I mean, hours and hours and hours. Not only of us working directly with people and patients and clients and analyzing behavior and diagnose, hours, like countless thousands of hours and hours and hours, right? It also consists of us looking at ourselves. That is a big component of our training. So that's important, right? You can't call yourself working with someone, helping them if you don't even know yourself and your shit is fucked up, right? So just trust and believe. And this is when it's done correctly. You sit across from a psychologist, just know they can see well into you because they saw well into themselves. We're constantly being, I won't say judged. It felt like judged. I felt like I was judged throughout my training, but we're constantly being assessed. Constantly. Like every class, every interaction, and think about it, like we're surrounded, first of all, by our colleagues, our classmates who study psychology, right? Everybody study human behavior that we're surrounded by. Classmates, professors, supervisors at our clinical sites where we work. So we're constantly being assessed. And I have stories about this, right? Like when I started my PhD program, I would do PhD student vlogs, I would call it, and just talk about my experiences. And yeah, you got to a point, it could be annoying too, right? A person to read you and you reflect back to you who you are. It's like, who the fuck you think you are? Like I had those moments where I myself became defensive, right? But it sharpens you and it shows you, like it's okay, right? And the thing is, when you know who you are, you know yourself in and out, big deal. If someone else sees that, right? Because you have to come to a level of acceptance of who you are. But it's only when you feel comfortable, you haven't kind of come to terms with who you are, you haven't quite resolved some issues from childhood or throughout your development, or some current issues that are very much still present that you're still dealing with, and then an outside person rubs the surface a little bit, right? Taps into those issues a little, like, hold on, right? Time to shut it down. Those defenses go up. And there are different types of defense mechanisms, right? A lot of times people who are of higher intellect, who have higher education, like to rationalize. That sometimes is a go-to defense. Deflection, a big one. You did it here, trying to turn the tables, right? And bring the spotlight on, psychologists, right? And talking about, your experience with a psychologist. But like I said, I think that he came from a good place. Like he just really wanted to highlight your perseverance and your resiliency, and you just didn't see it as such, which, like I said, speaks to more of where you were. I have patients that are severely depressed. Clinically severely depressed, and their lens in which they look at the world through is just pessimistic, is negative. And so nothing can, it's just funny though, working with people like that. And I dated someone like that. Oh my gosh, that was my best friend. It's a cool person. Like, I like his personality, very cool, down to earth, but it's just so everything is negative. I mean, everything. We have, like, the sun can be shining, everything is just going well, people happy, jolly, and they don't see, they just find the negative in it. And here, you have this person, like you say, you poured your whole life story into this person, as if, I guess, you're doing that person a favor. I mean, but then again, that kind of speaks to your egotism, right? Your narcissism. Like, I poured my whole life out, right? I'm sure if the psychologist was here, he would have a different take on you, which you probably can care less to hear about anyway, right? But it's just like, you pour your whole life story out, and then what? And then he tells you that he would have just killed himself, and you interpreted that as what? What was your interpretation of his statement? That he's saying that if he was in your shoes, he would have killed himself. Did you interpret that literally like, okay, well, you should kill yourself? So then you're looking at him as a role model, that he has the answers, and that he's somehow suggesting that you should kill yourself, right? And then continuing, you said that he apologized. You say he quickly realized what he said and apologized. He only apologized based on your reaction because he saw that you didn't receive it well, right? But another person in a different space would have received that as a compliment, as a testament to how far they've come and what they, was able to overcome. But you took it as a slight, like, wait a minute. Everyone is different. But I think it's just interesting. It's worth kind of focusing on, like, how you took that in a negative light. You saw that as a negative. You can compare that as an analogy to, okay, there's a New York City Marathon. It happens every year, right? Was it 26 some miles? It's a huge fucking task to accomplish. For people to complete fucking 26 miles through all 5 boroughs of New York City. And a person could say, a person like myself who's never done a fucking New York City Marathon, listen, I walk many miles, but that's a whole nother level. It's just like me saying to a person who just finished that race, right? The marathon. And I tell them, if it was me, I would have fucking passed out, or if I would have checked out at the 10-mile mark or whatever, right? And I just would have said, fuck this. I would just exited the area where they run. I would just went out to the side and just probably went home. Just said, to hell with this fucking marathon, right? Just fuck that. If it was me, right? Now, if you're a person that has finished a marathon, how would you, in a healthy perspective, take what I said as something wrong? If anything, your ego should be stroked to say, okay, I did what most people in my situation wouldn't be able to achieve. I did it. But yet you took that as a negative. People have said similar things to me, like, oh, you did it. You achieved your whole PhD. Like, the amount of effort, the amount of tears and blood and everything that goes into accomplishing something like that, right? I don't see how I could take that as a bad thing if someone else would say, you know what, I would have just said, fuck this shit. If I'm telling the stories I've been through to this person, but I get it. It sounds like you haven't quite overcome it. Clearly, at that time, you were not in a space to receive what he said because you probably was borderline suicidal. And you mean, granted, you deny it. You say, not I. Denial, possibly. defense mechanism, not me. And listen, I can be wrong. I'm open to correction, but it's just like, what I'm gauging, it sounds like you were not in that space of a person who had overcome. Like you were still going through, very fragile. And I think you're kind of still there. I mean, you've probably grown a little bit, but you're probably still that very sensitive, fragile person, which is okay. Listen, I'm fragile too, listen. Right? And so when we're in that space of fragility, you know, sometimes we have to distance ourselves from people because, listen, people may say some things and you're just like, hold on, you're not in that space. You're not in that space to be receiving little shit that motherfuckers be saying in their mouth, right? You know yourself better than anybody else, right? So then you distance yourself and you say, you know what? It's better I remain single. And I said this before, you know, and I can speak this language and speak this talk because, listen, I know myself. I accept who I am. I know myself. And I've said, listen, sometimes I remain single for y'all motherfuckers. Not so much for me, for y'all. This is to protect y'all. Because I know me, right? So you know the space that you're in. And I think it's just important to be mindful of that. And maybe that's something you're still struggling with. Like you say, never you. It probably never will be you. You would never kill yourself. Right? You have people that say that. And I've worked with patients, you know, of course I have to assess for suicide. And all my patients, I work at a psychiatric hospital. Not a regular medical, a psychiatric. So this is a specialty. They're there for a reason. So of course I'm constantly assessing suicidal thoughts, suicidality, right? And you know, there are patients, no, hell no. What the hell? I would never do that. But I have to ask a question. I have to tap into it. There's different ways to ask that question, right? But I find it interesting that people like yourself, hell no, never. Yet I'm working with this one patient that said, I never thought I would do that. I never thought I would find myself on the roof of a building about to jump. I never thought I would find myself standing on the fucking train tracks, wanting to end my life. It was like, how did I get there? You didn't even see the early warning signs. You didn't even see the development, the course of this illness, or whatever you want to call it. You may not want to call it an illness, right? But your mental health declining. You didn't see the decline. It doesn't happen overnight. And listen, if it does, where somehow you just impulsively say, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm about to go to the East River and jump in that shit, right? For some people, it does happen impulsively, right? The blink of an eye, then that's a whole separate issue, right? Maybe you're not depressed or suicidal. Could be suicidal in that moment, but maybe that's not something that is long-standing within you, right? That you are depressed. It could be an expression of a personality disorder, borderline. Usually borderline personality disorder people or people with borderline personality disorder are very impulsive. Things could take them off. They end it and they want to end it all. Fuck it. Right? And then moments later, you know what, I'm good. You know? So mental health, listen, it's a real thing. And considering the heaviness of your experiences, it is, I think, important, necessary, you know, for you to constantly be gauging. Not just you, all of us, right? But this email, right, came from you, right? This video obviously is in response to your email. This is about you. But you're just, you know, you're just one person that is confident enough to share with us your life experiences and where you are in your life. And, you know, it takes courage to do that and to see me here responding to your email. Other people will see it. So kudos to you. Therefore, they end up telling you who they are and not who you are. He says, thank you sincerely. But then after that, he sends a follow-up email and he goes, I wanted to add something and I knew it was coming. I just felt it. And it's good I have that sensibility. Even like I said, even like from reading this last email, right? Before he even sent this little blurb here and to follow up, like I sensed like, okay, he was feeling a certain kind of way. And listen, my video responses ain't for everybody, but I welcome anybody watching my videos, right? You included watching my videos, right? If you have a topic suggestion or a thing that you're going through, whatever, like I am receptive. Send me an inbox via email, right? If you're on Facebook watching this, right, when you inbox me, there's going to be an automated message that comes up that says, this is how you can reach me, because I don't really respond to my Facebook inbox messages. However, email, right? That's the preferred form of communication. Email me. You can email me, and with that, right, share your story, whatever it is, right? Some people just have direct questions they want me to address. My video is chopping up, so I'm about to wrap this up. But anyway, like some people have direct questions, send them to me, right? And I will follow up in a video response, just like I'm doing now. And we go from there. So he says, I wanted to add something. During our dialogue, I have drifted from a submissive personality back to my more public alpha persona. I am not surprised. I'm not surprised. You already said like you're interested in dominant black alpha men, but meanwhile, you have taken interest in femme boys and trans women. So you vacillate, depending. But I'm wondering how quick do you switch, right? Is it based on different triggers that happen? Sometimes different things can trigger us to go into a certain space or energy that comes out of us, right? And then we get triggered back into another space. Like, where does it happen? Where you switch, Like you said, different persona. You mentioned like your personality complex is complicated. I get it. I'm not sure what version of me is authentic or if it matters. All of it is authentic. This is you. Accept it all, right? You're a very, very dynamic individual, such as myself, such as other people watching this. We're very unique and dynamic individuals. So I even said this before, like why try to put yourself in one particular box? You just don't fit. Right? You just can't check off one box. But the reason I reached out was to explain that I am this strong person at the same time. I see that. I know that to be true. Listen, not too many people can send me a direct email message. And the way you just put it together, like I said, so succinctly, confident, like you can tell you have much insight, you know yourself, Listen, I can tell. You took the initiative. Hey, I respect that. I have this deep need to be submissive. Listen, I'm there. I don't blame you. But going back to my earlier question is, what is it that you need from this submission? It's something. You like really, when you think of like submission, it's a gift. You say, oh, I'm submissive. What does that look like? In my eyes, you're giving something. You're forfeiting something. What are you forfeiting? In exchange for what? What is it that you need? The last 24 hours is all I think about. This deep desire to be controlled by someone, an alpha male or strong motherly figure. I get it. I get it. And that's always, that ain't going nowhere. And you summed it up very nicely, right? You said it before I even did this video response. You said exactly what it is you need. You answered it right there. Boom. This deep desire to be controlled by someone, an alpha male or strong. You're just looking for parents. Your parents that was not there. You're looking for that in a partner. As an adult, will you find it? I think it's out there. I think the issue, and this is the issue that I come into, right? Now that I grew up without my parents definitely were there. There are certain aspects that I crave, though, especially in a man. And I just like that dominant energy. And so the issue that I come into when I'm, seeking this, which like I told you earlier, perhaps they say seeking you shall find, but and I found it. I found it before. I've definitely experienced that, and oh, was it lovely? It didn't last though, right? But it definitely was the catalyst for my book that I wrote called Dying to Submit. You guys go check that out on my website. But I talk about my experience in having a alpha male, a dominant alpha male mentor, and what that relationship looked like. I definitely experienced that shit, and it's just like, it kind of became the template for what I seek in a male partner, but it's difficult. It is difficult. I resonate with that. And so given, my particular interests, very unique interests, I took to FetLife. This was many years ago. And from FetLife, the only thing I was able to gain from that social networking site was being invited to this event. And it so happened to be my very first BDSM club experience, which I vlogged about. I think it was for my 32nd birthday. So go check that video out. Did this. I'm 40 years old now, so like 8 years ago. And yeah, I was on that website and I got invited by someone that I was connected to come out to this BDSM club. And at the time I was partnered. I was in a whole serious relationship with my ex-partner. I ain't gonna say no more. It was lovely, but that life is just like, from my experience, it's just a lot of people on there kind of living out their sexual fantasies and kind of connecting more so on that sexual vibration. Nothing wrong with that, but for me, that's not where I'm at, right, in my life. Like, I want something deeper than just sex, and they lead sex, right? And so I may make a post, let's say in a group, like, based in New York, right? A New York-based group on FetLife, and I get a bunch of responses, but it's just people, first and foremost, on their profile picture or in their profile got like their nude. I don't want to see a man's dick. That's just, for me, leave something up to the imagination. Just a turn off. And then even in their initial message they sent to me, it's just like, they're just talking about sex. So, and I can log on right now and read y'all what they say, but it's just sex-based. And for me, that's an immediate turn-off, right? For me, like, I want something that is genuine, something that is serious, obviously, but with the BDSM component. And I think that, for me, just my experience, has been hard to find, But yeah, like, I identify myself as a submissive for the sake of communication and being able to understand where I'm coming from. Baby girl, right? And for those who get it. For those who don't. But yeah, it's like having a man to meet me where I am. And it's not that, I'm developmentally regressed. I think that's where people's mind goes who don't quite understand the dynamic. But it's like, no, it's just, the level of care that a masculine dominant figure will give a baby girl. And I'm not saying like baby in terms of like 6-month-old baby or 2 month, nah, I ain't there, but more like, teenage age, just a young girl, like the attention and the level of care. I'm looking for that, right? And that's not that I'm looking for, but that's what I respond to, right? And so when I'm on a dating site, like the regular dating sites, right, I come across men and they just don't know how to meet me where I am, and they're like, what is it? Right? Like, you're so beautiful. Like, why are you still single? And blah, blah, blah. Like, what can I do? I get asked questions like that. What can I do to get your interest? And tell me, what are you seeking? Like, listen, you ain't it. If I have to tell you what I like, which I can put it into words and articulate it, but it's just like, I know they don't have it. They don't have what it takes, because alpha men don't move like that. Listen, alpha men go after what they want. They take initiative and they take the lead, and they just go after what they want. They take what they want. That's what I like. Now, granted, if I like you, right, then it's a match made in heaven. If I don't like you and you coming with that kind of energy, then I'm gonna let you know, like, I'm not, slow your roll, buddy. nah, I'm not attracted to you, right? It has to be a physical level of attraction. But yeah, when you come with that kind of energy and just know who you are and you stand in your masculinity, then I respond to that kind of energy. Not this passive beta male shit. Men just, they approach me and like, I don't know what to say. Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. I don't know what to get out my face, because how is it you don't know what to say? All right, I feel like if you're a smart man, you have the language ability, you have verbal skills, like, you should, like, know what to say. You have social skills, right? If I don't gotta tell you what to say, like, I gotta show you the way, definitely ain't my type. But anyway, to sum everything up, I just say that to say, I get you. I get you. For the one who sent this email, I understand. And so we can do, this is actually part 3, technically. This particular part 3, though, is broken up into 3 parts because I got a phone call from my dad, which I had to take. He just kept calling me back, and I had already spoken to him before I started the part 1 of this part 3 series. But anyway, I had to take that call, so I did get broken up. But anyway, let's go ahead and tie things up, because I do have to get ready for a day at the hospital tomorrow. But I will catch you all